What's up guys, HCZ here, welcome back to Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck of the Day. Today we are profiling the archetype that is going to take over as the new engine from Darkwing Blasts. So we're taking a look at Bystial. We've been including them in profiles already, but I just wanted to see exactly what the deck can do as an archetype of its own, and even though they are not playable by themselves, I feel like when you combine them with Branded, you can call it kind of an archetype that is going to be a decent deck, but I feel like the Branded archetype has lost its purpose in the format. It's definitely been power crept a lot, so I hope this archetype and this engine can make it, again, a little bit more powerful because it's a really cool deck, so I just want to see exactly how these cards can help them out, and I feel like they have really good synergies, so with the profile we're going to do today, we're going to see exactly what they can do. So before we begin with the video, if you enjoyed, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and now let's get to the deck profile. So let's start with the Bystial cards. We have 3 copies of Lubellion. This is the main card of the deck because it's the one that is going to give you all the advantage. It's a card that you want to send to the grave as quickly as possible because you can summon it from the hand or graveyard by tributing a level 6 or higher dragon monster. You can only summon it once per turn this way, and both of its other effects are once per turn. You can send this card from your hand to the graveyard to add a Bystial monster from your deck to your hand, and during your main phase you can place a branded continuous spell and trap card from your deck face up in your spell and trap zone. So when you draw it, it's a card that you can just discard it to get a plus, and then you can revive it back again, and then while it's on the field, you can get one of your continuous spells and traps from your deck on the field as well. So it's a good card to draw because you're going to get a surge. It's a good card to send with branded fusion to the graveyard. There is also another Bystial monster that can send to the graveyard, so it's a really good card and very easy to access in the deck. We have 3 copies of Bystial Magnamut. This is the card that searches during the end phase. It can be summoned by banishing a light or a dark monster from either graveyard. It becomes a quick effect when your opponent has a monster on the field. So these cards are not only extenders that can give classes, but can also be acted as disruptions when your opponent has monsters on the field. And this card, when it's summoned, it adds a dragon from your deck to your hand during the end phase. So it's a really good card because not only can it add the Bystial cards, but it can also add cards like Fallen of Albaz or Albion the Shrouded Dragon if you need cards that can give you some kind of a follow-up going second or even more draws. So yeah, it's a really good card overall, and play 3 of it for sure. We play 2 copies of Bystial Saronir. This is another card that has the exact same effect as the other one, first or going second. You can quickly banish a light or a dark monster in the graveyard. It's a quick effect. Your opponent has a monster on the field to summon this card, and if this card is sent to the graveyard, you can set a Bystial monster or one branded spell and trap from your deck to the grave. So this card can set you Lubellion in the graveyard to summon it, or if you already have access to it, you can maybe send like a branded opening to get protection fusion monsters, and being another card that can use this quick effect to special summon itself by banishing a light or a dark monster against decks like Tearlaments. It's a really good effect for those monsters to have. They basically add as extra copies of DD Cross, so even though we're not playing any hand traps in the deck, we basically do have a couple of hand traps that can act as DD Cross in the deck, so this is why these cards are really good. And the last Bystial monster is 1 copy of Bystial Drizworm. This is another card that has another effect, so we have 6 copies of the cards that use the same DD Cross type of effect, so you can summon it the same way as the previous 2. And if this card is sent from the field to the grave, you can target one of your opponent's special summon monsters and set it in the graveyard. So it's a monster you want to summon, then you're going to fuse it away, and then you can basically get rid of one of your opponent's monsters. So it's a card you're going to search most of the time with Magnamut, but even if you draw it, it's not a bad card to draw because again, it's an extender that can get rid of one of your opponent's monsters going second. Now moving on to the brand version of the deck, the Despia part of the deck is pretty standard. I would say everyone is used to this, so we're playing 3 copies of Aluber. It's the best normal summon of the deck, gets you access to your branded spell and traps, pretty self-explanatory. We play 3 copies of Despian Tragedy. We do play Allure in the deck, so we need to max this out completely because you can use its effect so many different ways. You can send it with branded fusion, you can banish it with Allure. It's a really good card to max out when you're playing a deck like this. We're playing 1 copy of Ad Libitum to go for the branded in red lace to bring back cards like Mirror Jade. We're playing 1 copy of Dramaturge of Despia because this card is another free interruption when fusion summon it gets back on the field, and then you can use its effect to negate monsters. We play 1 copy of Albion the Shrouded Dragon so you can use its effect to get more draw power because it's a card that you can very easily search because it's a dragon monster, so you can even search it during the end phase Magnamut. And we play 2 copies of Albaz. You can play 3, but I feel like if you manage your resources well enough, Bellion, and because you are not playing pure Despia, you don't need the 3rd copy of it because you can finish games more quickly than a branded Despia deck would because you do have those extra bodies in the deck you can summon very easily. So I feel like 2 is perfect. And the last monster in the deck is 1 copy of Yugioh, the Supreme Magical Force. This is the unfair part of the deck, I would say. It's a card that you can summon to your opponent's field branded Expulsion, and then your opponent is not going to be able to summon anything. If you're looking for a more budget version of the card, you can play Raz Disciple in the deck, which does have a common reprint. The only difference is that Raz Disciple prevents your opponent from special summoning monsters, while Yugioh completely locks them. They're not able to even normal summon or set any monsters. So it's a little bit better than Raz Disciple, but if you don't have access to this card, then you can play Raz Disciple instead, no problem. It's not going to be that big of it. We play 3 copies of Branded Fusion. Of course, it's the best card in the deck, and if you resolve this card, you're going to get so much advantage because we all know how Branded Despia used to work, and it still works the same way. It's just that there are way better decks right now. But again, if you're a fan of the deck, then this engine can help rejuvenate the deck and make playable again. We play 3 copies of Branded Opening. Getting access to Aluber is very important. An amazing card that basically an ETL for the deck, and it's also Return of the Dragon Lost from the graveyard, which is another thing that you can by sending branded spells and traps to the grave. We play 2 copies of Branded in red. You can get away with playing just 1 copy of this card, but going second, it's really powerful because even though people don't play hand traps anymore, going second, it's still going to be a struggle sometimes, especially if your opponent negates your Branded Fusion. So this card can help you push some fusion plays, which is why I feel like 2 copies is fine. 3 would be too many, and 1 would be too few for me, but I feel like 2 is just perfect. Now, one of the new cards that we have is 1 copy of Rebranded. This is one of the continuous cards that you can set on the field Bellion, and this card says that if a light and or dark monster is banished, you can target one of those monsters, place it on the bottom of the deck, and then draw a card. So every time you use an Allure of Darkness or something like that, you can very easily draw another card to replace the one banished. And also once per turn, if your opponent normal summons or special summons a monster, you can target a Bystial monster in your grave and you special summon it. So it's a card that the more it sticks to the field, the more advantage you're going to get, and it's very easy to get access to it because of Bellion, so your opponent has to deal with his continuous cards very quickly, otherwise you're going to get a lot of advantage. We do play 3 copies of Allure of Darkness, as mentioned before. We do play a lot of dark monsters because not only are we playing the Despia part of the deck, but only Lubellion is a light monster of Bystials, the rest are dark, so we do have a lot of dark targets, and because of Rebranded, combining these cards together can give you basically draw 3, so yeah, it's really powerful. We're playing 3 copies of Super Poly. In this particular deck, even if you're not a big fan of Super Poly in general for the format right now, I feel like in this deck it makes a lot of sense because you can use your own monsters very freely, because usually when you're using Super Poly as a card in other decks, you never want to use your own monsters, you want to use 2 of your opponent's monsters, but in this deck, using your own monsters to fuse, sometimes even setting a Tragedy or setting an Albaz with a set Super Poly can be enough to disrupt your opponent, because when they summon a monster from the extra deck, have an Albaz, you can go for a Mirror Jade to turn it into 2 interruptions instead of 1 with just a Super Poly. And even going second, this card can help you push through a lot of boards. When you have an Albur on the field and you can use this card to fuse for a Masquerade, it's a really good card in the deck. And we also play 1 copy of Call by the Grave because it's a broken card. And for the trap cards, the first one is 1 copy of Branded Beast. This is another continuous card that you can set on field, and it's a card that says that once per turn during the main phase, you control a bestial monster, you can tribute a dragon, target 1 card your opponent draws and destroy it, and during the end phase, you can target a branded continuous spell or trap card graveyard and place it on your field. So if your opponent deals with Branded, this card can basically put it backfield, and also it gives you free advantage because of all the bestial monsters that are going to be on field. And if you tribute Druid Worm this card, you can get 2 interruptions, because 1, you're going to destroy a card with trap card, and then Druid Worm is going to send another monster in the graveyard. So yeah, this card going first and going second, you can very easily set a Rebellion, so it doesn't matter that it's a trap card. And also the effect Tribute Dragons means that sometimes you can even tribute anything as a disruption, and also offensively to basically destroy your opponent's board. We play 1 copy of Branded Banishment. It's the most common trap you're going to be sending on the field with Albion's effect during the end phase to get more interruption. But if you know you can go for the Edo play, you're going to be sending the 1 copy of Branded Expulsion. By tributing a fusion monster, you target 2 non-fusion monsters that are banished or in either graveyard, you special summon both on 1 on each field. So this is how you give Edo to your opponent, and Edo says that the controller of this card cannot summon or set anything, and you're going to summon this in defense mode during your opponent's turn, so your opponent is not going to be able to switch it to attack mode, crash it to anything, and then you can OTK them during the following turn. So yeah, this is one of the main win conditions of the deck, because any deck at the format like this needs something unfair in order to be able to win and snatch games out of these broken decks like Sprite Runic and Tearlaments, and this is exactly what this card is for the deck with Edo. For the extra deck, we played 2 copies of Albion. The extra deck is kind of tight because, again, we do play Super Poly, so we want to play as many Super Poly targets as possible, so I could not find a space for a third one, and I value the second Bellion more than a third copy of Albion. And even though you're going to sometimes miss this card, you're going to be sending Titanic Lad Mirror Jade, which can also give you another interruption during the end phase because you can summon your Fallen of Albaz by deck. So yeah, this card is a good 3 of to play, but it's not something that is absolutely necessary. So 2, I feel like it's perfect fine. We played 2 copies of Lubellion. I need the second copy of Bellion a lot of the games, because if your opponent negates this card and you don't have a way to put it back or shuffle it by using cards like Super Poly Chain Linking on this card so you can shuffle it back into the deck, then you're going to have trouble. So you need the second copy in the extra deck just in case your opponent finds a way to deal with first one and you're not going to be able to shuffle it back. We played 2 copies of Mirror Jade. Without Libidum in the deck, we all know that Mirror Jade is basically infinite and we can keep bringing it back from the banished zone. So yeah, this card is the main disruptor of Branded, and it's still going to be like that for a long time unless we get more support that is more broken than this card, but it's very unlikely. So yeah, this card banishing as a quick effect, Regeking your opponent during the end phase when it's destroyed, really good. We play 1 copy of Titanic Lad. There are some scenarios where you want to send this card over Albion, the graveyard, with Mirror Jade, so you can summon your Albaz from the deck to fuse with another one of your opponent's monsters. So yeah, we play this card. We also play 1 copy of Alba Lenatus. This is a card that you're going to use against dragon decks. If you're playing against a dragon deck, then this card is going to be huge because you can basically contact fuse any dragon with Fallen of Albaz to summon this card, and you can contact fuse your opponent's entire board because this card does not say 1 dragon, it says 1+ dragon monsters. So yeah, this card can be the death of any dragon deck out there. We play 1 copy of Destiny and Quaritis. This is a card is here to save you from OTKs by lowering your opponent's monster attack point. We play 1 copy of Masquerade. You can kinda sometimes summon the second one, but I feel like when you're summoning 2 2 copies of Masquerade, you're committing basically everything you have for a win condition that is going to flop a lot of the time because of cards like Dark Ruler No More and Super Poly, so it's not something you should rely on too much. You just play this card because it's another card you can use when you use Super Poly, fuse with one of your own Despia monsters, one of your opponent's light dark monsters, and it's a monster that is not very difficult. It's very difficult to deal with because it keeps coming back when your opponent deals with it, so it's going to come back. Yes, you're not going to get burned by it, but still it's a monster that you have to get rid of twice, so it's not the most easy thing to do because the deck does have a lot of beaters, and a lot of decks right now cannot deal with monsters, especially during Sprite because it keeps skipping its own battle phase, so they need to rely on utility in order to get rid of your cards. So if you can amass a lot of beaters against that deck, then you can very easily snatch games from. We play 1 copy of Guardian Chimera to use with Bandit Red to get more interruption and more draw, and the rest of the extra deck is Super Poly targets. We play 1 copy of Garura, 1 copy of Madragon, 1 copy of Dragostapelia. Dragostapelia in this particular deck is really good because, again, you're not going to be using only your opponent's monster with Super Poly. If you were using only your opponent's monsters, Dragostapelia sometimes can be weird because maybe your opponent is not going to have fusion on the field if they're playing something like Sprite, but because you're playing Despia, you're going to have something like Albellion sometimes on the field, and this is why Super Poly is so good, because you don't mind using your own monsters, they're going to give classes regardless, which is why a card like Dragostapelia is really, really good. And sometimes even summoning Dragostapelia by Lubellion or Albion's effect is decent, and you don't want to go for Mirror Jade but value the disruption, the negation more. And 1 copy of Starving Venom, again, because it's a Super Poly target, it's a really good card. Sometimes even fusing this card with just your own monsters can be fatal against some decks. For example, this is an easy out to the Arrival Cyberstatic Nister because it's going to absorb its attack points and it's going to be 2800 attack points stronger, so you can run it over this way. So yep, that's the deck, guys. Bystial is just another piece that you can add to the puzzle of Despia. The Despia deck is just so flexible and so versatile that you can play pretty much anything that you like, so I feel like this engine gives it a lot of breath because the deck just got backseated because of all those new decks and new cards that we got, but hopefully with this engine playing in the deck, you can have more success with it and we can see it at the top tables once again. So yep, that's the deck, guys. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our upcoming content, and we'll see you next time.